photographer, videographer, and creator outreach manager at apclips.com. I've been working in the adult industry since 2010, 11, around there.
What was young Rae like?
Yeah, I was pretty introverted, but at the same time, I was always out, like, exploring things. Like, I'd say I almost gave my mom heart attacks quite a few times because I just like run off. And this was like before the internet, before smartphones and everything. So I just like run off and disappear for long periods of time playing, like, by myself and no one knowing where I am for the most part.
Yeah. And then just like be home by before it gets dark or something like that.
Yeah, but sometimes, like, sometimes like I'd run off to places where she can't, like, where I can't hear, like, where she can't see me or find me. And she's had to call the police reporting me missing a couple times. And then I come home and be like, oh, hey.
Oh,
Yeah, this is when I was like maybe 7, 8, 9 years old too. So,
uh-huh. That was back in the day. Yeah. Once you were like out of the house without a phone, you're just out. And
yeah. Yeah, but I was also in like I also like grew up in Boyle Heights, so it wasn't really the safest place, but at the same time, like we had a small community neighborhood, so it was still safe but not safe.
mhm.
Um, but I was always also building things or like taking things apart and putting them together. So I think I was a mini engineer, maybe. I
Yeah.
don't know. Like I took apart a television um when I was like maybe 5 or 6 years old, and I put it back together again, and reprogrammed all the channels, like which button you had to push on the TV. I remember my mom always telling me or telling people about that. That's what I did.
Oh, when you were 5 or 6 years old?
Yeah.
Crazy. So would you say that that was, um, were you always tinkering with things when you were younger?
I would say, yeah, I was always trying to figure out how things worked. Remember those like dolls with the baby bottles where the milk would go down in the bottle and then when
Yeah.
you put it back up, it filled up? Like I was like, how did that work? Why is like blah blah? And I take it apart and be like, oh, okay. And then like, I fucked up the toy. I can't put it back together, but I figured out how it worked.
Yeah, I think I remember that. Like you could get it at like the drugstore or the toy store, the little cheap little baby bottles, and yeah, you'd feed it to the
Yeah.
baby and it would disappear.
Yeah. Or like, and I build things without realize, or like, I play with Legos and blocks and stuff, and I start building things that in my mind, it was like, oh, this would make sense if we had like a whole like console for like I pretend like we were on a spaceship or something and build like Lego spaceship things and pretend like, oh, this is like the whole console thing, without realizing that that is something that belongs there. And I don't know if it was like a subconscious thing from what I picked up like watching television or what, but it was like things like that.
So you're like very like engineering, it sounds like, but also pretty imaginative when you were younger.
And a bit of a hellion.
I'm from Thailand then.
Yeah, but my parents are from Thailand. And I also grew up in Thailand. I was born here, but I grew up in like part of my growing up was in Thailand. So it's probably what led me to always be exploring and stuff because I was running around in Thailand. So I was born here and they had me move to Thailand and live with my grandparents out in rural Thailand from I was like 6 months to like maybe 3 or 4 years old. And so I just remember like, I grew up with like ducks and like elephants walking the roads and stuff. And my mom was like, when I learned how to say hi, like in Thai, um, you like, say hi, like you what, like, you bow down, it's called wine, why. So she said that when I started learning how to talk and everything, I was like saying hi and bowing down to all like the elephants and ducks and like traumatic core memories is like was being chased by like a herd of water buffalo in Thailand. So totally different. So once I got to America, total culture class, like, culture shock.
Yeah. But even that, like they say, I think like your really formative years, like for your brain, especially, it's sealed around the time you're like 7 years old. So it sounds like those are really like core memories that help to shape you. So what was it like then growing up in Boyle Heights, whenever you came back stateside?
Well, when I came back stateside, I didn't speak a word of English, and I grew up a predominantly like Latino like neighborhood. and I had a weird name. I had a weird accent. I didn't know English much. Like, um, kids would like, make fun of the way I talked. Like, I couldn't pronounce like the CH sound, like chicken. It'd be like chicken. They'd make fun of the homemade food my mom would make. Like, they're like, ew, what's that? Ew, what's that? Like, everything I grew up like being used to eating, I suddenly had to like, look down on, like, oh, this is something that would make me not fit in. But it was also like a pretty crazy time in Boyle Heights. Like, the school I went to, this was like decades before all this is like, what's happening now with gun control and stuff. They used to teach us how to like drop to the ground in case there's a drive-by shooting in our neighborhood, because it happened before in the neighborhood, but not at the school directly. I went to White Memorial Adventist school, which is no longer there. It's a Christian Seventh-day Adventist school, like 300 students max from grades K to 8th. It was like really small school, and it was partnered with the hospital. So it was right next door to each other. And one night, if you go there now, you'll see like there's this giant wall in front of the ER. But like before, there was no wall, and someone had actually done a drive-by and shot through the ER doors. And that was directly across the street from the school. As a kid, you don't really understand it because you don't like, you're being told what keeps you safe, but you don't know what's happening because I never saw firsthand, like, this shit, like, all those things, but I'd hear about it. And like, people would tell me, like, stay out this certain neighborhood because that's where the gangs hang out. As a kid, when you're told those things and you're like, just told, like, you're not told the specifics, you're just told, don't go there. You don't really, it doesn't really click. So I think the main influence it gave me was like trying to find out why, people are telling me not to do certain things and pushing the boundary about it.
I don't know if you remember or you were around for Dare.
Yeah.
Whole anti-dare campaign back in the day, and like we would put like little red ribbons on the fence, and everyone wears red for Dare or whatever, black. Um, but like you hear those things, you don't really understand exactly. It's not like a tangible thing unless you've actually experienced it. You just know it's kind of omnipresent. But for me, I guess remembering as a kid, like you kind of, okay, that's what it is. And so you just kind of listen to it. Whereas you were questioning, like, well, why? What does this mean? And
Yeah, pretty much.
would you say you're kind of the same right now as you?
Yeah, pretty much. I think so. Sorry, now I'm like, as a photographer, I'm also realizing why did I start recording? Like, why did we start the session with me doing this vertical instead of horizontal? But whatever.
If you want to reorient it, we can. Yeah, totally.
Okay, here. So we'll be both. There we go. It was bothering me a little tiny bit, but now it's
There.
like,
Oh, yeah, that's better. We got
yeah, I was just like,
it.
wait up, I'm a professional, and but also we're shooting on my phone because my computer isn't
Is
function like
yeah,
isn't like cooperating.
cooperating
But
today.
okay, so going back to that question,
The question was, do you feel like you're the same person now that you were then, as far as like inquisitive?
yeah, for sure. Like for a long while, it's like I was just wondering why society exactly the way it was. I dropped out of high school when I was like 17 years old because I was like, I there's a part of me that was like, I'm smarter than these teachers, like, and I got a high school equivalency certificate, which is like it's an actual diploma as opposed to a GED. So I was basically like, doing certification saying I already learned everything I need to learn in high school, and here's that certificate stating so. But when I got out of high school, the first thing I did was like enroll into community college, and all the classes I was taking was literally like all like political or like the history of America, cultural anthology. That was one of my favorite ones. Yeah, but when it came to like the history and stuff like that, I was like, this is the same kind of history that I was learning, in like grade school and high school. Like, are they just keep teaching the same like sort of history? Yeah, I think that's
Oh,
also when I started breaking away from the whole educational system too.
what do you think that was? Like, did you feel like you just weren't being challenged enough when you were younger, or was it like the
Yes,
actually teaching you and you were just bored with it?
both, both. I'm at that Christian private school. I like they give us all this like like exams and stuff like that, and they'd where they measure like your see, my brain doesn't work as well as I did when I was a kid. Those state tests, and like I'd always score higher. Like I'd be in like the top, like percentile and stuff like that. And they'd like I was reading at like 2 grades above me, starting from grade two, and like um. So when I got to seventh or eighth grade, that was pretty interesting because I started challenging all my junior high school teachers, and we were still at the same like kindergarten, eighth grade, but like I was challenging so many things, and like because it was a Christian private school, like everything they taught was like Christianity, and I was just learning like is Christianity right? Why do all these rules exist? Why is so I was really challenging that, and also change like I remember that's also when I started getting into like more punk and goth music too, because it was the whole opposite of Christianity, which
Yeah.
was like let me start getting into dark witchy stuff. I think the Nine Inch Nails downward spiral came out that same time, and there was this song called Heresy, and like part of the lyrics were like God is dead. um and I remember like seeing those words, and like when I was trying to sing along with the song, every single time that part comes on, it's like, why am I so afraid to like, say that God is dead? And that was me like starting like the whole rebellion questioning thing again.
So what did your teachers and your parents think about this part of your life? You starting to kind of rebel a little bit and question, and did they view that as problematic?
Yeah, the principal called me in and accused me of being practicing witchcraft.
Okay. Which would happen in a Christian school, I mean, to be honest, but
Yeah, I didn't think that would happen, but because I'd also started like reading all those like teen magazines like 17 and like YM magazine, all that stuff. And in those magazines they had like horoscopes in them. So I started like, reading about horoscopes, and I was telling my friends about them. I was like, "Oh my God, when was your birthday? I'll tell you your horoscope." So I guess those like, those kids went to their parents and were telling them that I was telling fortunes, and then those parents told the teacher that I was like telling fortunes, and like why is she listening to such dark music, and why also the other thing that was happening was the Bloody Mary thing, you splash water on the mirror.
yeah,
So
and
I might have done that in front of some people, like done Bloody Mary, Bloody Mary, Bloody Mary, and they're like, and they said that you were like throwing water on the mirrors trying to summon a spirit. I'm like, as a 13-year-old standing there, I was like, this is bullshit. Like, what the fuck are you guys on? Like,
but also you're surrounded by narcs, it sounds like,
right?
right?
Oh yeah, that was the worst kind. I was like, that was also like when I started picking up like all the hypocrisies in like, even just in my peers as like, like preteens, where they're like, where if you said something like God damn, or you swore or something, they'll be like, ooh, I'm telling on you, you just said God's name in vain. But then they go around and be like, oh my God. I'm like, that's also saying God's name in vain.
I think that was around the time maybe that it was like Nev Campbell, and like there were a lot of like witchcraft movies, including like, yeah, Sarah Jessica Parker. There was a big one with like the Ouija board, and so everyone started getting into Ouija boards. So what were your parents' views on like going against the grain, I guess, being that you
Well,
went
they,
to a religious school?
well, I don't think they recognized I was going against the grain because I'm a first generation born here. My parents are both from Thailand. They came here and they met here, and then they had me here. So I think there is a whole cultural difference between the way they grew up and the way I grew up. And I think because like the racism that they experienced themselves, and like how much they saw me trying to fit in, and they probably like I think they didn't think too much of it. They probably thought I was trying to assimilate into American culture because I was starting to whitewash myself. I was not speaking Thai anymore. I was like, because of all the bullying, I'd like start requesting my mom, don't make me like homemade Thai food. Can you make me like, sandwiches? And she's like, okay, I'll make sandwiches with wheat bread. I'm like, no, everyone has white bread. It's peanut butter and jelly sandwiches. that kind of stuff. So I think like from that point, I think like even when I was a preteen and I started wearing black and all that stuff, they probably thought that I was just actually trying to fit in, and they didn't think more of it that I was actually rebelling.
Did they ever have the talk, the sex talk with you? What was their approach, I guess, to teaching about sexuality when you were younger?
Well, my mom, when I started when she started seeing that I was hitting puberty, she just bought me a book and told me to go read it. So that's how I learned. And then they also taught sex ed in like, like freshman year of high school and all that stuff. So I learned from that. But mostly my parents were super Asian and very, we don't really talk about sex, but at the same time, we are very sexual. It was a really, really weird, like, like, weird thing. Like, my mom would not talk about sex with me. She'd give me a book and told me to go read it. But at the same time, she'd walk around the house completely naked and be like, like very body positive herself. And I'm just like, Mom, I don't want to see you naked. One of the most traumatizing things I experienced was like when I was like 7 or 8 years old. My dad lived in Thailand, and we lived. I was already back in the States, and he didn't tell my mom that he was flying back to LA, and so he flew all the way from Thailand and surprised my mom at a doorstep. And she's like, "Oh my God." Anyway, they went to the bedroom, and I just remember like, hearing what sounded like my mom getting like my mom, screaming or whatever. Like I thought she was like in pain or something, and I was knocking, and she's like, "It's everything's okay." And then like I try to like, opening the door, just lock, and she's like, "It's okay, go play with your toys." And I just remember thinking, "Oh my God, my dad's killing her in the bedroom." And 9 months or 8 months later, my sister was born. My dad was like, he was like a community figure, and he also knew a lot of like people who lived on the brinks of like, society, and he was also friends with a lot of like sex workers, Thai sex workers. So they like, they'd stay at our house. Like, we had extra rooms, or like, if we can house them, we'd have like, my dad would say like you could stay in the room and stuff like that. So I was also always like surrounded with sex workers.
Like he was familiar with these people, like as part of the community, and like they would just stay.
Yeah. So my dad was undocumented for, I'd say like up until like I was already an adult. He was an undocumented citizen, so he already knew all the in and outs of like, like applying for green cards. He became the person that people would go to learn how to apply for immigration, apply for green cards. So he was like, helping them fill out the paperwork and everything. So I wonder, I'm assuming that's what he was doing for like, some of these sex workers too. My dad passed away a few years ago, so all of his friends have been like filling in gaps.
So, what was your mom's take on all this? Was she also helping, like whenever the sex workers would stay at your house?
Yeah, she'd cook food for everyone. She was a really great host to everyone. She was a nurse, and she worked night shifts. So she'd be sleeping during the daytime and like, be there like in the evenings to like have dinner with like cook dinner, and then she'd go to work. So she was like, as like, she always cooked for everyone, like whoever was there. But she also never shared anything. Like there are times where like, it'd be like, "Oh, dad does that. How come you never told me anything about dad doing that?" He's like, and she was just like, "That's dad's business, not your business." I'm like, well, seeing that he wants me involved in his business because he was trying to get me to do immigration work, I'm like, I should probably know his business.
He was the go-to person, and now people are
Yeah.
still kind of continuing his legacy after
Yeah,
he's.
yeah, even after he passed, up to his death, he was still helping people do like the immigration work. And like COVID hit, and like the pandemic unemployment stuff, he was helping people get that, and it was to like he got so overflowed, he was asked me to help them. So I was helping like, a lot of immigrants like apply for like the pandemic unemployment stuff. And when he passed, they'd like, they still asked me for like, help with their papers. And I'd be like, I don't know much about it. That was all my dad's stuff. And he was trying to teach me, but I didn't like, I was like in my own little like I'm an artist.
What did he think about your work then? Since he was kind of in his own activism, even touching in our community, what did he think about the work that you were doing?
I don't think he knew that there was much of a crossover. He knew that I was like a photographer and artist. He knew that I was taking photos of risque things. Like I'd even brought my brother to like be my assistant, like, with holding the bounce and lighting and, just like on lookouts because when I started, I used to do a lot of guerrilla shoots where like I didn't have anything. So my brother would be my lookout for me. So my family knew that I was taking like, like sexy photos of people, and they went to a couple of my art shows, but there's no like I don't think they knew that there was an overlap or like that it was also part of like, I was doing my own sort of activism and they were doing their own.
That's a good segue then to talk about your work a little bit more. So, how did this all come about, crossing over into the adult space?
Again, all because of my dad. One Christmas, I'm gonna go start from the beginning. One Christmas, he gave me a camera for my birthday, my very first digital DSLR, and I decided to run around town with it. And I'd met this dude off of OK Cupid, who was like a club promoter, and he asked me to go to his club, like this club that is opening. And I was like, oh, I'll bring my dad, like the camera my dad got me. And I started taking photos of like the people there, and then I took a photo of like the owner and the promoter, and they're like, oh, can we have that photo? And it ended up like being used in like LA Weekly or something, and I just somehow became their house photographer, which led me to nightlife photography, and then MySpace started, and Ian Mackay of Vivid Alt added me on MySpace, and he saw that I was like, an event photographer, but he'd also was like, he was doing all those Vivid Alt parties, so he'd invite me to like, those release parties, and I'd bring my camera, and I'd start taking photos of like, those parties, and I met like a lot of adult people, like industry members that way, and so they're really starting to get familiar with me being like a nightlife photographer and a friend of Ian's, and you know, and so Twitter started like shortly after that, and I remember going on there and I was like, I tweeted because at that point I'd only done nightlife photography, event photography. I'd never done like actual like studio photos or like portraits or anything. So I tweeted saying, hey, like who want like, I want to do a shoot. Who wants to be my first model? And of all the people who responded was Dana DeArmond, who at the time was the internet's girlfriend. He was like pretty big at that time, like, with the whole alt porn thing and like, with social like MySpace and Twitter and stuff like that.
This was
So
early
I
2000.
took photos.
Okay.
I'm pretty freaking old.
You just did the
Asian
MySpace
genes.
reference. Sure, yeah. Okay. All right.
um yeah, so I took photos of her. They got posted, and that time of like a queer performer, and very unknown at like I think still like relatively unknown, to the point where I can't remember their name, but they were a trans queer performer. And the very first trans queer, the second model I ever shot, and the first trans queer model I'd ever photographed too. I photographed them and then posted that, and then I believe Courtney Trouble saw that work after that, and she also saw that I knew Ian McKay. Oh, and like we by chance, I'd also somehow showed up at her house during Pride, where she was shooting a music video in her house, and I was somehow involved in the background. Anyway, we met, bumped into each other again on Twitter, and Courtney was my very third um model ever. So, and after that was Jiz Lee. So with the combination of Jiz Lee, Courtney Trouble, and then the fact that my first model was like Dana DeArmond, that blowing up the queer porn scene in San Francisco, and like me just dipping, like, taking photos of that, that's sort of when like they realized that I'll take photos of queer folk. And then one year during one of my ABN visits, like, I just went there to hang out. I never like I wasn't really fully an adult. I took portraits, so like, outside this, like, not even like explicit stuff, artsy photos. But I showed up to ABN one year, and I took the bus out there actually. I remember this. I showed up late and I didn't realize that Courtney had actually she didn't just want me to be there. to like assist. I literally showed up to the hotel room. She had like, journalists there, and she gave me like her camera and said, "You're shooting this porn." And then that's literally how I got into porn. She handed me a camera the second I got off the bus from Vegas, told me to start shooting, and the first porn I shot was a four-girl orgy.
Have you ever sat, that's just like you said a mouthful, like all of that just now, and how like one thing flowed into another. Have you ever thought about like, why did this happen? Speaking of, the inquisitive person inside of you, like, why did this happen? How did this happen? That just seems like it's fate.
It's Yeah, I question this a lot. And like, how could this all be like happenstance? How am I always in the right place at the right time doing all this stuff?
Do you think that it's still those types of opportunities still exist? Like if you were to just be starting out today?
Back then, like as opposed to now, like everyone is a creator, everyone can shoot their own content. So if I were to go out and try like, photograph people again, unless you're already like, you've built relationships, there's a lot of people already self-shooting. So I don't think it would have been as easy. It probably would have been a lot more like you'd have to like network your way in, because the adult industry doesn't open the doors to everyone, or like they don't just ask anyone to take photos of them, or like you have to build a sense of trust, like, or relationship with the people you're working with. So I don't know, I don't think it would have been as no. I guess like if you did the same thing now, it'd be like, you'd work if you happen to take photos of like the most popular social media like adult star, and then they vouched for you, then yeah, it would probably work.
What have you learned about creating content then since that first shoot and since you first started?
Well, lighting is key. Please ignore the fact that I have really bad lighting on this interview, but lighting is key.
Yeah.
Very ironic that you are interviewing me and I failed to put any lights on, but yes. Um, Production wise, pre-planning, always good. Like, I doubt I already knew, but like, but also staying calm in situations, because people read off your energy. So if you go in and you are like a ball of anxiety, they'll read off that, and you're not going to have a good like you're not going to have a good production from that, especially if you're like the one holding the camera.
Can you talk about the social justice component of your work? Because it seems like just naturally, and especially now, having a better understanding of how you were raised, your parents' influence too. It seems like you're just kind of a natural advocate. Can you talk about the role of advocacy and social justice?
Yeah, thanks to Courtney Trouble, thanks to queer porn. If it weren't for like, the chance of meeting Courtney, like the opportunities Courtney gave me, I probably would not be so like, involved. I wouldn't have realized that like, I was contributing to any sort of advocacy. Like when it comes to body positivity, when it comes to like queer rights, gay rights, when it comes to like, sex worker rights, it all kind of blossomed just from being part of like the start of like queer porn, like the whole indie queer porn revolution, probably. That's how Courtney would also brand it. Um, Before then, I didn't even know that like fat porn existed. I met April Flores through Ian's parties because, um, but I think that April was the first like BBW performer I'd ever like met. Shooting all the content I did and like seeing how like comfortable they were in front of the camera, how much they loved themselves, loved their bodies, and they like, wanted to show off their bodies. And that was like a click for me where like I wasn't really liking myself. I wasn't really liking my body. Like I didn't think that, someone like me would ever feel like be wanted or anything, but seeing them like perform, seeing people want to see them perform or buying their content, like, that that changed it for me.
Social justice advocacy, how does it come through in your work? Like how are you able to, I guess, convey this messaging and awareness through your work?
Well, I never discriminate against like, who I worked with. And for like a period of time, I was like, mainly a queer porn photographer, and I worked with a lot of like, new performers, and I'd be like, their first photographer they'd work with, and like and I didn't realize that like just me being there taking your photo was like, something that was needed because people weren't taking photos or like, or like photos that they can monetize at least. I don't know,
Uh,
like I take photos of them and just be like, hey, take the set, go make money.
yeah,
Yeah.
because that was around the time then that like performers probably felt the need to have to hire someone to shoot photo sets, etc. Versus now everything is self-shot and there's all this access to equipment and stuff at, maybe more decent price.
Yeah.
So okay.
Yeah, no, back then it was like, your phone couldn't do things like this. I was an artist in residency at Level Ground, which is like an arts organization production hub. And one of my projects, my artist in residence project was like kind of interviewing people about how their environment and society, like their culture, like influenced how they viewed themselves and their bodies. And one of the people I'd interviewed, um, they're trans, and they said they I remember this like distinctively where they said that if they had never found queer porn, they would not still be existing. They would not realize that people like them exist. There was a reason to still live.
Wow. Wow. Have you ever shot like mainstream adult side of things?
Yeah, a couple of times. Like Jessica Drake had me shoot the Guide to Wicked Sex stills and had me on set. But that was pretty much the only like mainstream world is very, they're very broy and very, they always work the same people, at least back then. Now I see more femme photographers, but like I think I was probably one of the very handful of femme photographers even working in the industry. And also because my style isn't so commercial, very like, gothy, dark, moody,
Yeah.
DIY, like I'm all self-taught and stuff. Like, these bros are coming like, oh, I have like, these huge tongues and lines, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, I have a work lamp from Home Depot. So I don't like, they'd ask me to list my equipment and I was just like so bare bones that they'd be like, okay, well, just hire someone else who has all the equipment. Yeah, because as a queer porn photographer, even in queer porn, you're not making as much money as people in mainstream. Still,
Mainstream
no.
adult. Have you found since then, like over the years, then that there's more opportunity for you? Like if you mentioned Jessica Drake, but like just in general for adult mainstream feature film type work, if you wanted to cross over into more of those types of projects, is there opportunity there?
There is now a lot of like femme photographers are being hired now, and I love it.
It's a little more open these days than it was maybe, even 10, 15 years ago.
I wasn't always in the Bay Area. Like in the Bay Area, you especially like the queer porn times, like it was normal to like find like femme lesbian photographers and stuff, but some place like in LA, somewhere like in LA, there's some photos I posted where I'm literally the only femme photographer in a row of all male photographers like doing red carpet like AVNs or XBids and stuff. And I'd be like, oh, look at me, I'm the only, I'm the only woman here again.
So having then, since you've worked in mainstream, which I think, especially for people who are, or maybe I just got the sense over the years, like that if you're adult and you crossed into mainstream, like you really made it, you know? So do you see a lot of benefits in working in mainstream versus adult, or are there really any big significant differences between the two types of industries?
There are. There are quite a few, but also I want to interject and say that like a lot of the crew who work on like the bigger budget porn films, half the time they also do work mainstream as crew. There's quite a few differences. Like working in mainstream, you realize that you don't have to be the one doing everything. There are actually different people for different roles in different departments, like camera light, crafty, like your own assistant. You actually have a whole team to do each and every single role to kind of alleviate the stress off of you. But at the same time, it's also super stressful because you're on like a tighter deadline, bigger budgets, more demanding clients.
Yeah.
Um, in porn, this is a really like, there's more consent on a like adult sets, like adult film sets. there's more respect for each other. I think it really was beneficial for me to have these production jobs where I learned like, oh shit, this is how you budget for a film. This is how like, let's like spreadsheets. Oh my God, production planning. Oh my God, look at the scheduling.
Because I've heard these stories of like people just don't show up even though they've been booked for shoots. And like, do you feel like we're in general more disorganized then?
It's that too, or like, time constraints and stuff like that. They're more respectful of time on the mainstream things. I'm not gonna dig into it because it's about to happen. So
Okay. You don't want to be, you don't want people pointing back to this like, okay, I
oh,
got
she's
you.
talking about it right now.
Right. Okay, I don't want you to call yourself out in the future. That's okay. Yeah, I've always been baffled by that little fact though, because it's, even though I'm not in film production for adult, I feel like just regardless of what facet you're in, it just kind of is this cultural thing that, okay, there's more grace given because we're kind of disorganized sometimes, or people tend to be flaky. I just didn't know if that was the same case in like mainstream, if like people were just as,
um
flaky or.
Not flaky. Like people will be late, but then their agents will be called, they get yelled at, blah blah blah, because it's like, bigger budget, maybe they're more responsible about it. I don't know.
Yeah.
Or like, it's a bigger brand or something. I don't have much experience like in like actual film sets. I mostly work commercials, and there's a lot more money in commercials and music videos. At least like the big like production music videos. So not the DIY ones, but the actual big name ones. But yeah, like union jobs. These are commercials. These are like most of the time they're union jobs and stuff like that. People are very like, prompt and very on it. Like everyone knows their role, know what they're doing. Like, um I feel like an adult, like you give your friends a lot of opportunities, particularly like, Courtney just handing me a camera, not knowing I've never shot video before, but here I am shooting porn, like, years later. Thanks, Courtney. Things like that happen where it's like, oh, well, I don't trust anyone else. Why don't you come on set and do this for me? I think there's like a joke, a meme of some sort, how to tell the difference between like indie porn and mainstream porn. And like the indie porn, you'll see like I'm guilty of this too. You'll see like the light stand in the background or the cords on the floor or something like that. You don't have as many people keeping an eye on things or looking at like, being like, oh, we got to move this. Oh, this has to be cleared, that kind of stuff. And you don't have like big monitors. Well, some of the bigger productions have them, but like, you don't have Video Village where you're sitting and you can see everything, and like the client's gonna be like, no, that has to be like 4 crackers, not 5 crackers. Like I worked a Ritz commercial, and there's a whole debate
Oh,
over like how many crackers should be on a plate, and the ratio of like, apples peanut butter crackers versus cheese crackers, and what looked more appetizing for Ritz in porn, where it's just like, oh, it's a cum shot. Okay, where it's like, like
right.
it's like the cum should be a little bit more like dripping down over here. You don't get to like be picky about how things happen
And
or
I'm not
look.
trying to like speak ill, of course, of our industry. I think it's just something that you've just come to
Same.
kind of work with and accept and, be flexible on. But I also, now that, you were talking, and I realized that so many of us are also just wearing so many hats that, maybe it might not be as polished on a set as, say, a mainstream shoot or a mainstream production, but at the same time it's because, we're all giving so much energy just to do all of these millions of
And
little.
also, yeah, but also the lack of budget because the lack of stigma. Like, if porn wasn't so stigmatized, I would see like, mainstream studios like funding all these projects and funding these productions, and things being like equivalent to like, a mainstream like film and stuff like that. But because the stigma exists, it'll stay small. You'll still have a like, limited budget as opposed to like, to a mainstream film. I also used to work for a film institute, and I used to supervise a lot of the short films like the students did and everything. And you'd find out their budget, and like for like a 12-minute freaking like movie, a student film, their budget would be $60,000.
Oh my
Whereas
gosh.
you'll shoot a porn You rent a hotel, the max, like what, 1,000 at most?
These are presumably self-funded a lot of the time.
Yep, they're all self-funded. Yeah, as opposed, like, you can't just go out and be like, "Hey, do you want to fund my porn? You want to be an EP of this porn?" Like, you don't see EPs for porn. Like
Yeah,
executive producers. You
yeah.
don't see people executive producing porn, but you have like there's more chances of you getting like funding for like non-porn film as opposed to like a porn film because also people are afraid of like fucking like credit card processing stuff.
Even if someone in our industry just wanted to approach get funding outside of our industry, then you'd be taking a lot of risk, like personal risk. And it might not even necessarily work out to get like a loan or funding or capital to make a
Yeah.
production.
But you do get the creepy dudes. Like, I don't see anyone else like, funding these films unless they're a creepy dude or they're already like, in the industry. There are like, obviously a lot of uh self-made rich people in this industry.
Yeah.
They will help out like, other smaller projects, but like you don't see rich people on the outside like throwing money at a porn. Like how did it get returns? Like what are the risks?
So let's actually move into the last part that of our chat today, which is your involvement in the community and activism. I've just seen you everywhere and you seem to know so many people within our community, different types of people. Can you tell me why is community important to you?
Without community, you don't have the support that you need. Like, people have chosen family. Community can be chosen family. When you find your community, you know that you're like safe there. If there is a danger to your community, you will want to prevent that. You want to keep your community safe because that is your safe space.
You're also involved in
Mm,
Sunday Fair, by the way.
yeah,
Which is such an amazing initiative. It seems like so many just individuals are the ones that are taking these initiatives to provide these resources. It's not some like outside, heavily funded organization per se, but it's actually people on the ground.
yeah, it's all grassroots. Like,
Many of these people are on doing it on a volunteer level. They're not necessarily getting paid for it. So yeah, it's do the work and or the marketing advertising, like it's hard to really, again, with the multiple
yeah,
factors.
as an individual, you're very limited on resources and comes in like, helping out the causes that you care for. But now, like, working for a platform like AP Clips and having better resources, bigger resources, to be able to like, fund, like donate towards like overlooked organizations.
Heavily underfunded as well. Okay, one final question for you then, and we'll wrap
Hmm.
this up around community. What do you hope for the future of our community? And what do you think are solutions or improvements that we could make in this regard?
What I'd like to see is like, I don't know, just the stigma to stop. Like, I wish that we weren't always fighting for survival. I wish we weren't always fighting for basic rights and like, banking discrimination, but that's not like within the community, that's within like the outside. There's like a sort of kinship when you work in adult. You know the same struggles, you know the same fights,
Yeah. Well, yeah, maybe in not every corner of adult, but definitely, yeah, there
yeah,
is
and
people for sure. It sounds like really just the stigma from the
yeah.
outside adult world. Only time will tell too, but it's really good to see people like you that feel emboldened to even take the initiative and take like energy out of your life to go out into the community and actually do things and like make a difference and listen to other people and understand what's going on in their lives and try to make an impact, whether big or small, in any way you can. And that's, I don't know you super well, but that's what I've learned about you so far, and I really admire that a lot about you. Really, really appreciate you for taking more than the allotted time also to talk and share your stories too. I really appreciate you so much.